for persons who are interested in politics, and also people who are interested in understanding genuinely a new perspective on the Bible. Now, the last time I was here, I gave part 1 to understanding the kingdom through a geopolitical lens. And I would have outlined a main thesis. That the Bible is not merely a spiritual or a religious book focused on personal salvation, but it is a geographic and a geopolitical document that reveals a sovereign God who directs the affairs of nations, determines the course of history, and is establishing a kingdom on earth. And that kingdom has a king, a capital, a government, and we all have a role to play in it. I quoted from the book Geopolitics of Israel, Biblical and Modern. And the author made this statement that I built upon. The founding principle of geopolitics is that place, geography, plays a significant role in determining how nations will behave. And if that theory is true, then there ought to be a deep continuity in a nation's foreign policy. The author from the book says that Israel is a lab for this theory since it has existed in 3 different manifestations in roughly the same place, twice in antiquity and once in modernity. I made a point from Genesis 2, verses 7 to 17, that there seems to be something special about the geographic area that we have noted as the Garden of Eden. Can everybody see that? Yes. You can? Kind of? I'll read this through, it's fine. In verse 8 it says, the Lord God planted a garden, Eden. And it says also, as we go down to verse 9, there is a tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it was divided by 4 rivers. I made a point that if we're supposed to track where these rivers are, we could have a geographic outline of where Eden is located. You see how this works? I knew today was going to be important, and I figured this projector was not going to work. And I called Eliud and I said, please bring me a backup, because I know how this is going to go. And look at that. In verse 13, it says that one of the rivers flowed around the whole land of Cush. Verse 14, it says there's a third river called Tigris. I made a point that we can track those rivers today, and also a 4th river, that is the Euphrates. Now, my sermon is entitled, Wake Up Jamaica. The political parties have their own titles and manifestos. I think the JLP's was Choose Jamaica. I think the PMP was Time Come. No, it was Jamaica Love, actually, in their manifesto. Yeah, Jamaica Love. But Time Come, yes. But mine is Wake Up Jamaica. Because after all of the voting is done, after all of the celebrations are done, we still have hard choices that we need to make. And my continuation today is not to only show how the Bible is a geopolitical book, but I want to also focus on how that impacts Jamaica in particular. For viewers online, if you're from a different country, you can email us in and I'll try and do one specially for you. But today, I'm focusing on Jamaica. I gave a map to outline where ancient Kush was. I also gave you an outline on the right about when we track these four rivers, what geographic area do we find ourselves in? And that is in and around the Middle East. I have the purple dot there showing you where Israel today is located. I went through Genesis 10, showing you the table of nations. In the middle, there's a land of Canaan, which Abraham was promised. Later on, it becomes the nation of Israel. We spoke about Genesis 17, about how God is actually bringing about this kingdom through one man and his family. But ultimately, he's establishing the kingdom of God on the earth. He said to Abraham that he'll make him into nations and kings shall come from him. In verse 6 of Genesis 17, it continues in verse 8 and it says, I will give you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, or the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. So it's very important to understand the geography. Additionally, I want you to pay attention to what we said in Exodus 19 and Exodus 23. I made the point that in the establishment of Israel around the same geographic area that we see in verse 6 of Exodus 19, where God says to the people of Israel that you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now, what is very interesting that we skipped out last time, but I want to bring it up now, is that in Exodus 23, when the promise is given to Israel, it sets out a clear land border. And in Exodus 23, verses 31, it says, I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines. And for most of you who don't know today, that is Gaza, in and around that area. Yeah. And from the wilderness to the Euphrates. Now, I showed you in Genesis where the Garden of Eden had its outline. I'm making a clear connection in Exodus 23 that when Israel is established, once again we see this term to the Euphrates River almost as if it's the same exact location or general area. We made the point that after Solomon's sin, the kingdoms were divided in two, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. And there was an exile, first to Assyria for the northern kingdom of Israel, and then to the southern kingdom of Judah by Babylon. We spoke about Daniel, the three Hebrew boys, this statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had in a dream that Daniel interpreted. We also made the point that as Daniel would have progressed in time between the Babylonian kingdoms and the Persian kingdoms, he has other dreams that confirms the geopolitical nature of what is to be established. Now I want us to have in our minds, and when people ask me why do I believe in Christianity, my answer is this. It seems to me that there is an entity called God or Yahweh that is able to predict centuries before time how world events will happen. This entity is able to tell you which kingdom is going to come, which kingdom is going to fall, which kingdom after that is going to take the place of the kingdom that came up, and also which kingdom after that is going to take the place of this other kingdom that then came up. And he would have used different prophets and people to communicate this message as witnesses. These messengers and witnesses die centuries before it happens, and we today are beneficiaries that those things did actually come true. So the question now becomes, who is this entity that is able to do this? That irrespective of which world leader is in power, whichever world leader is affecting the world by policy, that there's an entity that can determine its downfall even before that nation knew it. The good thing is that is the God that we serve. Amen. And if this God is able to do that, the question I asked the last time is, what can he not do in your life? We spoke about the transition of powers in Daniel 11. At the time that Daniel lived, there was no Greek empire. There was only the Persian Empire that would have controlled most of the southern region of Israel, and I have it in green. Greece is located to the north, and as you can see in red, you had the Greek Empire coming up. You had in red, and you had the green empire in the Persian Empire. In Daniel 11, it talks about what is known as the king of the north, king of the south. It starts out with two powers, Persia and Greece, and that is very relevant for us today. For you young persons, there might be some name change of some countries that you don't know, and I'm sure the more mature persons in the audience will understand exactly what I'm talking about. It starts out with Persia and Greece. As history progresses through Daniel 11, we see that the Greek Empire is transitioned into what is known as the Greco-Roman Empire. For example, when Jesus was here on earth, he lived under Roman occupation. However, a lot of the persons spoke Greek, and that is because they would have subsumed the Greek Empire into their own cultures. They had Greek gods, they had the Greek language, they had Greek thought. So it is known as the Greco-Roman Empire as it transitions. Now, important for us today is at the end of Daniel 11, we see a time where it says, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. So we have the king of the north, which is now the Greco-Roman Empire, and we have the king of the south. So as the Greek Empire starts to dissolve, there is a southern power that is still existent and comes up and makes war against the king of the north. And it says at the time of the end, and the question is, are we in the time of the end? And if we are in the time of the end, then this is relevant for us. And not just us generally, us in Jamaica particularly. 41 of Daniel 11 says, he shall enter into the glorious land. Remember, this is Daniel who is writing this, the glorious land. So happens to be the same area in the Garden of Eden, the same area in Exodus 23, which is Israel with Jerusalem as its center. Now, a little history lesson. Not many people know that when the Roman Empire started to lose some of its power, and you introduce the papal powers, it became known as the Holy Roman Empire. I've highlighted in blue at the bottom, for those of you who can't see the screen, it says the Holy Roman Empire was also known as the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. Does anybody know a country called Germany? Okay. So the official name of the Holy Roman Empire when the papal power was introduced is actually called the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. So immediately, if we're trying to understand this beast power or this fourth power in Daniel's dream, immediately we can associate it with Germany. Is everybody clear? Following so far, right? Sister Eulalie, I see you have your Jamaican thing waving. Thank you for supporting me. I appreciate it. Change names. Also, we should take note that, as I said in Daniel 11, you had Greek, which became the Greco-Roman Empire. And interestingly, you have Persia. So for those persons who are new to geopolitics, you're probably a teenager or young adult. In 1935, you should note at the top of that list in the middle that today's Iran is actually called Persia. But when you look in the news and you see Iran, a lot of persons don't know that this is actually Persia. And if we read Daniel 11 very carefully and we start to understand the king of the south, we start to see a very interesting picture unfold. Now, we have groups amongst the Worldwide Church of God affiliates. CGI, you have UCG, you also have Philadelphia Church of God. In one of their articles in Who is the King of the South, they identify Iran, Persia, from Daniel 11 as the king of the south. That's just an opinion. But the fact that there is a Muslim alliance at the south of Israel now is alarming to me, and I pay very close attention to it. And when we understand Daniel 11, we start to have a dividing line. We see the north in terms of the Greco-Roman world. South, we have countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, all south of that line going into Egypt. And a reminder again, when we look at the Garden of Eden and we start to see this landmass being outlined, it's the same landmass that is continuously repeated over and over again. Where we left off the last time was with the emergence of BRICS. And what I try to show is that when you consider the geopolitical relation of Israel, or Greater Israel, sometimes as it's called, and you look at all the modern day blocks that is happening, north of Israel you have Europe with its alliance with the United States, top left of your screen in blue, versus red, which is Russia, a part of the previous USSR or the Soviet Union. And for most of us who are, history, people are interested in history, a lot of that was around the Cold War after World War II. Additionally, on your bottom left, what I've highlighted there is the Muslim coalition primarily led by Saudi Arabia and Iran today. So what you start to see is a clear block of countries pitted against each other. Muslim coalition to the south, NATO and the Western allies to the north, and we start to have Russia over to the east. I made the point that if we read Revelation 16:12, once again we have this reference point as the great river Euphrates. Once again, the outline comes back as in a reference point that we can make around this particular landmass. We have the emergence of BRICS, and I also try to show top right of your screen the BRICS alliance, which now includes Russia, India, China, Brazil, South Africa, and the affiliates, which are Saudi Arabia, Iran, and some other nations. That's where we left off in part one. And the point of part one was to clearly, first of all, show where this geographic location is. Is there something special about it? Will it have any future implications? How does it impact us today? How do we prepare? What are some of the things that we ought to be thinking about? So now we're going to get into part two, since we have now done a recap. Why does this matter? Does everybody know what that is? JPS bill. I know. How does JPS come here? It's a fair question. Yeah, you could turn off the light for me, please? Come in on that side. JPS. Why does this matter? Now, this is not my bill, by the way.
Not too small. Too small.
Yeah, when you see that, 35,000, definitely not my bill. But the point that I want to make with this JPS bill is that in Jamaica, a lot of our electricity or source of energy is actually priced in US dollars. On your JPS bill, you see an exchange rate, and they tell you the rate that they calculate it up. That means that every time that you flick on a light switch or you use energy, you're spending US dollars. Although it's converted to Jamaican, if the US dollar goes up next year by another $10, it automatically means that even though you're using the same amount of light or even less, your JPS bill is still going to go up. Because Jamaica does not control its energy source. And because we don't control our energy source, it means that we're open to price changes. Everybody follow me so far? So that means if you're a business owner and you want to manufacture something, the US dollar matters to you because you use energy. It means that if you want to go to the University of Technology Jamaica, you want to go to the classes, you want to come and use the lights, the cost of your education will also go up because UTEC's light bill will go up. It also means that if you want to have gas in your car and you want to purchase fuel, the cost of transportation will also go up. So when we think about what is going on in the world, we're not isolated. We're very much impacted. Now here's something that we should note as well. What you have on the screen is the worth of the US dollar over the last, I think, almost 100 years on your left. Now, what you're seeing is that they're trying to tell you how much things a US dollar can buy. So now it is worth $1, you can get a McDonald's coffee. Before, you could have bought 10 rolls of toilet paper, and it starts to come down in terms of what you can afford. Now, I know a lot of us don't have a financial background, but it's a very important lesson about money and how money works geopolitically. If you also look on the right, you have the national debt of the United States, and it currently stands at, I think, about 35 trillion or something like that, and going up. So this figure was at 2024, I believe. The blue part of the graph shows you when the Democrats were in power, how much money was spent. The red parts of the graph show you how much money the Republicans spent in terms of the national debt. Now here's a simple lesson. If I gave Brother Parks 5,000 Jamaican dollars, and everybody else in here had nothing, and I said, I want to sell this water. Brother Parks is the only person I can get $5,000 from, right? Therefore, if everybody was dying of thirst, how would you get the water? More than likely, you try and rob Brother Parks. No, right? Now, here's how money works. If I started to print another $5,000 bill, you don't necessarily want to rob Brother Parks anymore. I might give it to Deacon Clark and you might have to rob him. Just okay. No robbing. But the more $5,000 bills I print, is the less valuable it becomes. And all of a sudden, I don't want to sell this for $5,000 anymore because so much people have $5,000. So I must can put it up to $10,000 for the same water. So as the debt goes up and there's more money being printed in the United States, it means automatically the cost of living goes up. And your JPS bill is in US dollars. I want you to think about that. Now, additionally, as the US debt grows, and I want you to pay attention in terms of when it was growing, so that long blue stretch right in the middle was under Barack Obama. So as you can see, it starts out with a little stairs. You could climb, you're walking, it's an easy walk. And then under George Bush, it got a little bit steeper. The walk was a little bit steeper. Under Barack Obama, this thing got very steep. Now your thighs are starting to burn you. Then Donald Trump comes into power, and now you're talking about cliffhanger, right? Because now you need some real assistance. Joe Biden comes into power, and this thing is getting dangerously steep. And I think the other day, Donald Trump would have increased it significantly again. No. Yeah, recently it went up. So that if you look at the debt clock right now, it's past 31 trillion. Yeah? Hold on. You need to borrow money to input infrastructure. That's you need. Yeah, it has to happen. That's one of the concerns, because under Joe Biden, they used to have this limit that they're saying, no, the debt is getting too much, and then they all agree to just remove the limit. So imagine you have a credit card, and they're just raising the limit of your credit card, but your salary didn't increase. And they gave you another $100,000 on your credit card, and you're spending it, but your salary didn't increase. And they gave you another $500,000 on your credit card. Your salary didn't increase. To keep on borrowing money. Now, this is very important geopolitically, because for years we have held that the United States is the world's superpower. The country that is able to hold national reserves in the US dollar currency because of its dominance, because of its superiority. When we talk about the American dream, people think about the land of opportunity. Once you reach there, everything will go well in life. That used to be the case, but things are changing. So I'm hoping that young persons who are thinking about going somewhere to live or education is paying attention. Now, why am I making this point? Because when we look at Daniel's statue, we know that the Persian Empire has already gone. We know that the Greek Empire has already gone. We know that Jesus was in the Roman Empire. And we're now in the feet in terms of the toes. There are only 4 kingdoms. Rome was the last kingdom. So therefore, any version of the toes must be some sort of Roman-influenced area or geography. Everybody agreed? There's only 4 kingdoms. There's only 4. Babylon was 1. Medo-Persia was 2. Greece was 3. 4th was Rome. The 4th kingdom was the last kingdom before Jesus Christ came. Therefore, whatever version of the world dominant power right before Jesus comes has to be associated with Rome. Everybody's clear on that, right? Simple maths. So if it's a resurrected Roman influence power, which we know should be north of Israel, the glorious land, what relationship does it have to the United States, and how do we make some practical decisions around it? Now we're coming up to the Feast of Trumpets. And Matthew 24, when Jesus was asked about the signs of the time, the disciple says, tell us when these things will be and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age. And I said in Daniel 11, is if this is the end times, then this means something significant for us. And Jesus answered them and says, see that no one else leads you astray, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. And they will lead many astray. And we clearly see that happening. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed. And that's a focal point that I want us to take away. It says, see that you're not alarmed. So although you see the wars and the rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. And for me, this means because there is a God that is in control. What we're reading on the news is not random. It's not unexplained. We understand what is happening. And he says, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. And if yesterday was any account of what is going on in the world, boy. Did you see those videos of New Kingston? Yeah, that one too. I read J.L.E. Benz just floating away in New Kingston. I'm like, wow. Just floating away. And I thought to myself, you know, interesting enough, a lot of us were just leaving that area on a Friday evening. The environment is becoming more potent. The climate change is becoming greater, the change of climate. So when you're talking about earthquakes and famines, we're expecting that these things are going to come. The cooling and the heating of the earth, the famines that come with it, the droughts, the wet rain that comes, floods out a lot of the agricultural produce. I know Mikey can tell us some information about that. Oh, yes. But here's the worst part. It only says that this is the beginning of birth pains. And I've heard persons say, but look how long them fighting. Fair. But as I made in my last presentation, it's the first time that we've seen some sort of Israelite presence or Israel presence in the land. Whether they call them fake Jews or not, the point is that geographically something is happening there and it's associated with Israel. You've never seen that before. And additionally, more recently, Donald Trump. Did you know that the Department of Defense has been renamed to the Department of War? I can see somebody follows the Republican. The reason was that previously it was the Department of War. And they won a lot of wars. They're very decisive. They said that when they tried change it to the Department of Defense, they started to lose. Vietnam, for example. Afghanistan. The reason is that they started to lose. And therefore, they want to regain their place at winning wars. And they started to think about what could cause them to start winning. Change of name. Department of War. Pete Hegseth is now the Secretary of War. Now, I know that we're joking about it and laughing, but psychologically, this is going to have an impact on the world. Because other countries who are looking on are thinking to themselves, that hold on. They're no longer just defending. They're going on the offensive. And they're not coming to play either. They're coming here to destroy. And a lot of times, you know, you hear this saying, to ensure that peace reigns, you just have to make sure you have the bigger gun. Who said that? I don't know, it's just a term I've heard. Sounds reasonable though. I feel like if you pull out, you're going to have a bigger gun. Crisis averted. Back down. But here is the interesting thing. We sit in Jamaica, we sit in the Caribbean, and we're thinking to ourselves, does this geopolitical unfolding have any implications on us? Oh, yes. Answer is yes. Oh, yes. Very recently, Venezuela, and I don't know if a lot of us know the history of Venezuela, closely aligned with the communist agenda from the USSR days. Venezuela and Cuba, two of the countries in this region. Recently, there have been strikes on Venezuelan boats because they are apparently carrying drugs. And the narrative is, allegedly, President Maduro is a drug kingpin. If you listen to Donald Trump and the narrative that is there. Now you might think of this as just, just something that's going on in the region. It's nothing to worry about. But if you look at who the friends of Venezuela are, and the fact that there is some U.S. presence in terms of warships that are in the Caribbean Sea, everybody's starting to get a little bit nervous. Additionally, Jamaica has been named recently. I keep hearing that. You mustn't worry about it until you need to worry about it. Jamaica and other 4 other Caribbean countries are also now on the drugs list. Now, may I remind us that this has been happening in the past. This is not the first time. Remember that in the Cold War, our neighbor Cuba was blockaded by an alliance between the United States and the West. There is no trade allowed to happen with Cuba. Even the other day when they were taking the doctors and the doctors from Cuba were going out, they were saying it's a humanitarian crisis. Human trafficking is happening. But the point that I'm making is that Jamaica geographically, although we're blessed and although we can take advantage of so many opportunities, we're dangerously close to the politics that is unfolding in the world. And as a people of God, we need to be getting this message out there that, listen, don't just get distracted by what's going on in a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday. Don't get distracted about the politics that is going on the National Sports Day and who is going to win, green or orange. There are significant things that are happening in the world that will impact the people of Jamaica. And we must tell Jamaica to wake up. Additionally, remember that Michael Manley, when he was Prime Minister, had a close relationship with Fidel Castro. And you must remember that it is alleged that the CIA was in Jamaica planting guns and weapons.
That's real.
Alleged.
No, they did it.
Alleged.
They did it.
Alleged.
They did it. They did it.
The point is Jamaica is dangerously close to the politics that is unfolding, and we need to understand what is happening. If we see that the United States is in trouble and it makes them look weak, the ploy is going to, you have to make yourself look strong.
Yes.
And you have to make yourself look strong in your own backyard to ensure that other countries do not come into your region. It gets deeper for Jamaica. Remember, we have a lot of Chinese-built roads. And I was surprised the other day that I was driving to work at UTech, and I was passing a house being built in Hope Pastures. And what do I see? A lot of Chinese workers on the scaffolds. And I said to myself, I won't tell you what I said to myself. But the point is that Jamaica being in the backyard of the United States has implications. Because as the Chinese government starts to roll out its Belt and Road Initiative, especially geographically, because we have a perfect location for distribution. When you think about access to the Caribbean markets and also to the North America, Jamaica sits perfectly between the Eastern Caribbean, the North America, and Latin America as well. The ambassador at that time warned Jamaica to tread carefully with a two-headed dragon.
Who is that? US?
China.
Oh, China.
Remember, at the same time, we had diplomatic problems because the United States was trying to impose their values on the Jamaican government.
Stand up.
And if you don't comply, sometimes you have to wonder, travel advisory. What does that mean for tourism, our number one industry earner?
Yes. Have to stand up.
What does that now mean for remittances in terms of the farm work program? A lot of persons who are in the H-2B program going overseas. I saw recently that for the H-1B, which is the skilled worker program, companies now have to pay $100,000 per person.
That's crippling.
Additionally, the newspapers are now reporting that that same plot of land that I spoke about from the Garden of Eden, right now going through a war. Modern day, the nation of Israel. 90% of Gaza is now destroyed in terms of the homes and critical infrastructure. Jamaica is in the news, almost as if we take one position. We stand with Israel on October 7th, as you can see it in the Guardian at the bottom. Yes. But recently, Jamaica recognized Palestine as a state. Yeah, you should check your news last year. So Jamaica is being viewed by the world. What is your stance? Because your stance determines a whole lot.
Yes, Jamaica.
If you have the wrong stance,
Who decide that?
will our citizens travel to your country? I almost feel like we should be running the government. Like we understand these things. You know, we know what is happening. We know the chess move. We know it's going to play out already. We already know what is going to happen. We'd have to figure it out. Now, as Donald Trump has renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War, I made this statement the last time. Because we understand what is happening, because we understand the geopolitical nature of what God is doing, we accept this assessment of the EU starting to ramp up their defense outside of the United States. When they're starting to rearm, what that will mean is that the United States will no longer be the police of the international community. The EU will step up as another body that could potentially also police what is going on with the different countries. Now, as I said to you before, we have to understand what that means for us, because we source energy, and what is going on in the EU, Russia, Ukraine is very important for us. As we see the wars escalate, the cost of living will get higher. You already know this from today. So do not wait until later to start to do something about it. Additionally, I want you to start paying attention to the narrative. Now, a couple days ago, I think 5 days ago, there was a drone attack from Russia going into Ukraine. Some of the drones allegedly went over into Poland because the longitude and latitude was jammed, and the drones just flew over. Allegedly. Now, the narrative was not that Poland was shooting down the drones alone. Look at the narrative. The narrative was that NATO had to defend its airspace. That's a bad narrative. Because it's one thing to say Poland is defending its airspace against Russia. That's simple. That don't sound as aggressive. But once you start to use the word NATO, then all of a sudden it has implications for a lot of countries. The 27 member states of the EU, Canada, the United States, UK. When the news starts to change, and you remember how the newspaper works, they sell things that are sensational. They sell war, they sell fear. So a newspaper article will get more views if they say that NATO has to defend their space, rather than saying, say Poland call me and say them have a problem, and they shoot down 2 things. Yeah, man, just Poland. But NATO. The reason that I'm making this point is that as we are seeing the wars unfold, and the narrative internationally is that NATO has to defend itself, remember that the United States is also a part of that, which is right beside us. Yesterday, 3 Russian jets went over into Estonian airspace. Allegedly, it was an accident. They were flying close to the border and they just edged over. The response from the news was not that it was just Estonia responding. It was NATO, once again, had to defend its airspace. Now, if you start to put everything together, you start to say to yourself, hold on, the EU is now increasing its spending up to 3.5%, 800 billion euros. The United States of America is now renaming itself to the Defense of the Department of War. China is building roads in Jamaica and around the Caribbean nation.
That's a good thing.
And they were reading Daniel about the king of the north and the king of the south. We see Iran and Israel constantly trading blows. Something is cooking. And getting hot in the kitchen. Now, just so you remember that the entire point of the NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, its sole purpose after World War II was to combat the USSR, or the Soviet Union. That was its sole purpose. Russia, although it's not the full USSR, represents the strength of what the USSR was. So as we start to see NATO grow and expand and include other member countries, the question is going to be, how much do you trust Russia to respond? And are these drones really just going over into Poland allegedly out of mistakes? Are the Russians flying jets into Estonia's airspace allegedly because of a mistake? Or are they testing the capabilities and the resolve of NATO? And if they're testing the resolve of NATO, and you know that they have nuclear weapons, do you go and get a bigger gun? This is the question you must ask. Because remember, when you look at this chart, it says estimated spending level needed to deter Russia without the United States. So the question is, do you go and get a bigger gun? You're not relying on your friend gun anymore. I thought about you as my Minister of National Security, but I don't like your assessment sometimes. You might send us into something that. All right. So we're starting to see these puzzle pieces go together from Daniel, and we go into Revelation. And we have been told that Revelation by John the Apostle, the revelation of Jesus Christ, given through John the Apostle, is a direct continuation of the book of Daniel. The fourth beast in Daniel 7:19 to 22 gives a description about what this beast is going to be. Here in 19 it says, "Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet." Verse 20, and it's at the bottom, I've highlighted it. "About the 10 horns." So notice that the beast was described to have 10 horns in Daniel. That's the fourth beast, the last beast, that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. Now in verse 22, in the interest of time, it says, 21, "As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them," 22, "until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom." So there's a clear connection between these 10 horns that's described in the beast and a kingdom that is right before the Ancient of Days came. Now when we fast forward and we look at Revelation 13, which is at the top, it says, "I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon, which is Satan, gave his power and his throne and great authority." So whatever this beast is going to have great authority on the earth. We see the 10 horns, and it seems as if this beast in Revelation 13 is an amalgamation of all of the 4 beasts, resulting in that final kingdom. Verse 3, "One of its heads seemed to have been a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast." So notice that whatever this kingdom is, which I have associated with the king of the north, which I have associated with the 4th beast, seems to have some sort of influence over the world. "And they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast? And who can fight against it?'" And when you start to think about the amount of money that the EU is spending on its military, you start to think to yourself, hold on. Is there something going on here that the world is not seeing? They're really focusing on Donald Trump, on what is going on and the potential decline of the United States, but nobody is seeing that the EU is rising up. And we said earlier that we knew that the Holy Roman Empire, really, its name was the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. And we know that Rome is literally in Italy. We know this. We can't go there today. We know. The Roman Catholic Church, is also in Italy. We know this. So there seems to be an association between Germany and Italy in a geographic area that is north of Israel. In Revelation 19, just before or right around the coming of the Lord, it says in 19, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies." So the beast is there. The kings of the earth are there. That means that the beast seems to have some influence and being able to guide the kings of the earth, or the rulers, or the nations. to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who is in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast. So notice that the false prophet was able to do signs and was also able to deceive persons who had received the mark. In Revelation 13, when you go back, we see a second beast that comes up, also able to perform the same signs, making fire come down out of heaven in front of people, and by the sign that it was allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceived those who dwell on the earth. And in Revelation 17, we see this woman that is riding the beast, and that is for another time. But the point is that we can see a clear unfolding of geopolitical nations. And they're located north, south, east of the glorious land, which is the same landmass that we spoke about in Genesis. So if I had to do a prediction, as we look at Daniel, we understand more about Revelation. We're reading history. We're looking at current affairs. That resurrected Rome that is in play right before God's kingdom, it's going to be some version of those European countries. Now, I'm not going to be bold and say it is definitively the EU. Maybe there's something coming that has it more defined. But definitely, I must know that at least Germany and Italy are a part of whatever that body is. And right now, all indicators point to that European mass, which is incidentally north of Israel. So when we look at Zechariah 14, and it says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. We read our newspaper, we hear about the destruction in Gaza, we see that Israel, being backed by the United States, is a dominant force now in the Middle East. And I've always thought to myself, there is a legacy that is awaiting in Israel for a prime minister. Yeah, man. Any prime minister in Israel, in my view, that can deliver Jerusalem for the people will go down in history as potentially the greatest prime minister in modern day Israel. And if we're seeing that Hamas was in Gaza, 90% now destroyed, we see Iran, a military force, Persia, Israel bombing them. We see in Lebanon with Hezbollah, Israel once again destroying anything close to the border. It seems as if they're just clearing out the land and neutering everybody who can oppose them in the region. My question is, for what purpose? Is it just security? Or is there another agenda? Now in Ezekiel 36, if we tie in all of this together, and that's why, I've come to really appreciate the Church of God International. Amen. Because when we read the Bible, it's such an interesting book to understand that it can allow you to live a good life. If you follow the laws of God, it gives you a guide, a blueprint, how to live this life. And additionally, it also gives you the greater picture of what is going on in the world and how you fit into that. And I've heard a lot of church communities or persons claim to be churches say that Israel is done. There's no Israel coming back. That time has gone. They can have the land, but in terms of God's plan for them, no. That's you guys are silly. Brother Parks, you're silly thinking about Israel has any future plan. God, no, come on. Done. And this text in Ezekiel always stands out to me. In 22, when it talks about Israel, and Ezekiel 37, 38, I believe is the valley of the dry bones, and you go on. In 22, it says, therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake. Now, that's a very potent statement, you know. He's saying, Israel, it's not because of you why I'm doing this. He says, it is not for your sake, O the house of Israel, that I'm about to act, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations to which you came. God is concerned about his name. And he's concerned about how we treat his name. And if this entity can predetermine nations, powers, the rise and fall, then how do we honor him with our behavior? Because of his promise that he made to Abraham, that this geographic region will be an everlasting possession. Yes. There's absolutely nothing anyone can do to thwart that. Not even Israel themselves.
Good point. Not even Israel.
So as we read down, it says 23, and I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, and which you are profaned among them. And the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the Lord God, when through you I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. 24, I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. My question for these church people that say that God has no other plan for Israel. He says, when I do this, you will know that I am the Lord. So if him don't do it,
Well, you won't know.
oh, you're going to. And as we see the geopolitics unfolding, God has a clear plan in terms of what he's trying to do. I have some simple advice as I come down. You know what is coming. You know the geopolitics, you know how it's shaping up, you know the implications. Be smart about it. I have a couple of tips. Get practical. Yes, you should fast and pray, and that is very important. Yes, you should read your Bible. But you also need to get practical and do some things that God can use. Put on the full armor of God. And sound the alarm, but don't be alarmed. And when I say get practical, I have some practical things. Practical. Now, what I have on the screen, bottom left, is the U.S. national debt and how it's been increasing over the years. Now, what is interesting about this graph is that in 2030, they're projected to be over 100% of GDP. That means that the amount of money that they can generate in terms of income, their debt will be over that, over 100. They'll have more debt than they make money. When Jamaica was in that position, the IMF came and said, oh, don't increase the pay of the nurses, don't increase the pay of the doctors, let your roads mash up, everybody take a pause. Cut your belly. Bye. Sorry. Apologies. Bye. And they said, you have to go through an austerity program.
Oh, we went through it. Oh.
I'll never forget those words by Andrew Holness the first time. Bitter medicine. I remember that.
Well, you're late.
Him smart way make somebody administer it and then come back. if we look at the European Union, what you'll realize on the graph there is that this is a comparison between their debt to GDP ratio in terms of how much debt you have versus how much income you earn in 2014. And it was higher. That means that they're either reducing their debt or they're increasing their income. It's one out of the two things you have to do.
Yes.
And what you'll notice is that the most right is the EU. 2014, debt to GDP ratio, the debt was much higher in terms of the ratio. It has come down. So although some countries in the EU are still struggling, overall the EU is doing better. And their economy is becoming, as a bloc, becoming more attractive, more stable. Versus the United States, which is currently declining. So I've showed you at the top right, Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio, just to show you in 2008 how it skyrocketed. It was at 143.9%. And this is what the JLP would have partially campaigned on in 2024. It brought it down to about 67%, thereabout. Magnificent job.
Careful.
Magnificent. I will note though that it started to decline under the PMP.
Yes, it started.
Started. Finished by the JLP, but started. As I remember Andrew Holden saying that they must be given credit for what they did. But the credit is wiped out because they started it with FinTech. But at least he gave them credit. That's fair. He gave them credit. But what we can do for this is also reduce our debt to GDP or income ratio. That means avoid unnecessary loans. Unnecessary. Some loans are good. Unnecessary. Or increase the income. Getting a second job, for example, or a third job. For example, I have 5 jobs. Yeah.
Just 5?
5.
Just 5?
Yeah, 5. My wife cuss me almost all the time. Burn out yourself. Like I'm doing it for the family. Second practical advice, and I'm very serious about this debt to income ratio, because when you do have loans that are unnecessary, for example, as I said to you before, the US dollar is declining in value, which means that the cost of living is going to go up. And sometimes we have to increase our interest rate to control inflation, which means that how much money you pay back on a loan is going to increase. Don't put yourself in that situation unnecessarily. That's something you have to consider. Long-term savings in euro or gold. You can have a short-term savings in USD. Short-term, America is not going to burn overnight. Some people disagree. It's not going to burn overnight. Short-term, 6 months to a year. If you intend to use that money, you can have it in US dollars, or if you plan to travel. Long-term, I say gamble on the euro. If it is that Germany and Italy belong to this bloc, and their economy, in terms of their debt to GDP ratio, is improving, they're going to be spending on their military, which means that their economy will be stimulated. I believe that the value of the euro is going to go up, or at least hold its value. Gold is a good alternative. That has also been on the increase. That's practical advice. AI. What a lot of people don't realize is that the European Union is now becoming the world authority and regulator of AI systems. They're the first bloc to implement AI laws, which governs the use of AI as a country. No, so China uses AI, but not regulates. And that's the EU regulation. It's a very strong regulation because companies like Google and Microsoft might get away in the United States, but once you go to Europe, it's a different kettle of fish. We are affected by things like GDPR, the Data Privacy Act. We were affected first by the European Union. And then we got something called FATCA, which is from the United States. But it's always the European Union in terms of regulation and telling the world what they can and cannot do. Comes from there. Now what this means and why this is important is because as AI rises, a lot of our incomes will be affected in terms of job loss. and also redundancies as companies try to become more efficient. Nobody cares that AI is mashing up the environment. Nobody cares. They're going to be using it anyway. So the best thing that you can do is either become more acquainted with AI or have an AI resilient job. And what I mean by AI resilient, there's some jobs that AI can't touch. You're still going to need these professions around. Healthcare, for example, doctors, nurses, we don't trust AI yet with surgeries and administering needles. We don't. And more than likely, no, I wouldn't. I'm sorry. I wouldn't. Education, teachers and instructors. Be able to keep up with AI and educate persons. The creative fields, music, artists. Some people are saying that the creative field will be replaced by AI. That's not true. AI will assist, but it will never truly replace the creativity of the human mind. Technical and engineering. If you can't beat them, join them. So AI engineers, people who can write software, coders, things like that, young people, these are some industries that you can consider. Management, HR, I think that's safe, human relations. Might become AI relations later on, but for now, still human relations. And most importantly, last but definitely not least, is skilled trades. Electricians, plumbers, persons who are farmers, specialized trades like law enforcement. Somebody needs to rule the unruly people on the road. Still need people for that. not same. So skilled trades. And if you don't have a skilled trade, try and get one. Like I was very proud of Sadiq the other day. He told me that he became a licensed electrician. And Sadiq can wire your house. And that's not his primary job. But if anything goes wrong, he has a trade. So those are some of the AI resilient jobs. That means that AI won't impact them fast enough. There's still something that you can pursue, especially young people who are looking for industries or even persons who are willing to switch careers. These are some of the ones that you can do. Outside of this, become associated with AI. Use it, try it. It's going to be introduced in your workplace. Most companies in Jamaica right now are developing an AI policy. It's going to be used. Practical. At home. Because we know what is happening, because we are exposed to external shocks, we should start things like home gardening. Actually have some food that you can grow in your backyard. I know we've said it, but you really should at least learn how to do it. Invest in renewable energy. Fuel is going to become very expensive unless what I hear on the news is true. Allegedly, Jamaica has oil that is close to them. I don't know if that's actually accurate or how realistic it will become. But until that time, we still have to depend on external energy. And therefore, renewables like solar, wind, you can invest in that, start building your houses for it. Call Sadiq if you want to wire something. Rainwater harvesting at home, your barrels, your drums, some bleach to make sure that you operate as though you're putting chlorine in there. And one of the most important skills that I think everybody should learn is learn to start a fire. The reality is that if your gas stove is too expensive to maintain or JPS is unreliable and electricity is gone, you should at least know how to start a fire. Go to some of the more mature people or people from country, go and find out how to get a coal stove going, like should. Primary skill. Put on the full armor of God, and I'll talk about this more later on. But we are the Church of God International, and on our logo, we have these two swords that are there with this helmet. It represents the full armor of God. Donald Trump has said that he's renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. That means it's wartime. We have to suit up. It's no longer time to be playing games. We're spiritual warriors. The belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the gospel of peace for your feet, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit. This is who we are as CGI. put on the full armor of God. Whichever area you're weak in, ensure that it, as a part of your meditation, that you improve it and that you're ready to resist what is coming in terms of what is going on in the world. Sound the alarm, but do not be alarmed. Mr. Faidi there. Because we know that something is coming. Jesus Christ is coming to implement his kingdom here on the earth. And as we connect back to Daniel, we know that right before this, there's going to become a time of trouble that the world has never seen before. Therefore, we can't keep this information to ourselves. The political parties have no answer. They don't fully grasp what is going on. We do. And we're better equipped to prepare people emotionally, spiritually, economically, and even politically. Know what to say and what not to say and who to say it to. Use words like allegedly. Not this happened.
Thank you for that.
And finally, as I made the point that there is a kingdom being established on the earth, for your notes, I want you to take note of this. In Revelation 21, 1-4, it says, Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the earth and first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Where will this be? The same place that started out in Genesis. In Revelation 22, some of you say we read the Bibles. I hope you've gotten to the back. It says, Then the angel showed me the river of water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Through the middle of the street of the city, also on the other side of the river, was a tree of life. The tree of life seems to be coming back with its 12 kind of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. In Genesis 2, where we started off, it said that the tree of life was in the midst of the garden. My thesis is the Bible is not merely a spiritual or a religious book focused on personal salvation, although that's what it is partially. It is a geopolitical document that reveals a sovereign God who directs the affairs of nations, determines the course of history, and is establishing a real kingdom on the earth. It has a king, it has a capital, it has a government, and you have a role in it. Thank you. Let's hold on.